to press that button. Okay, so the topic today is I'm not ready yet. And this has been an issue for senior living providers my entire 30-year career. It's the challenge that when I brainstorm with marketers, it's in the forefront. But as you can see, it was difficult before, but COVID-19 has definitely added a dimension that we never expected, and it's making it even more difficult because previously, the I'm not ready yet might have been some underlying issues that we're going to talk about today, but now it's sort of like, hey, I'm not ready to utilize your services because I don't want a stranger in my house, or I don't want to move to a community where I'm going to be quarantined. And so we've got to brainstorm amongst ourselves and come up with some solutions, okay? So those of you who've been on these calls, this is an image that I always share. These are the three buckets that the senior living providers who are on this call generally fall into: the housing options, the aging in place options, home care, universal design, transportation, what have you, and then the resources option: aging life care managers, elder law attorneys, area agencies on aging, villages, nonprofits, things like, well, villages, I would put those in the aging in place category. And sometimes we're in all three buckets or one or the other. The next image that I want to share with you, which I changed this week from three buckets, is to this sort of intersecting image, because this is going to be very important. So the base of the pyramid when we've been discussing marketing issues is we have to have an understanding and record keeping, and we got to keep track of who our clients are, you know, what makes them tick, what services are we providing, what are their pain points, what are the problems that we're solving, what are their hobbies and interests outside of the services that we're providing, so we can find more of them. This is my general marketing philosophy is birds of a feather. We just need to find more clients, members, residents, just like the ones that you've got. The second element is who are your referral sources. Same thing. If you understand and know who your referral sources are, you can get more just like them. And lastly, which I think is going to be very important today when we're addressing I'm not ready yet, is who you're giving referrals to. So when somebody says I'm not ready yet, it doesn't mean that you sort of shut the door on them and sort of say adios. It may mean that you dig in and try to help them and refer them to other providers. And that's going to result in goodwill to you. It's going to result in some positive referral relationships with the providers that you're referring to. And it's going to overall, you know, solve the individual's problem in a meaningful way. And I think now more than ever, we are going to collaborate as we transition through this post-COVID world more than we ever have. And we did a lot of this before, but I think that we're going to come together as a community. I see us coming together as a community in a more meaningful way. I'm throwing this up here because these are some of the reasons in the past 30 years that we've heard people say, I'm not ready yet, okay? And I'm throwing this up here because I want you to think about this, and I want you to add to this list for our discussion today. But I'm gonna run through them, and I'm gonna run through a couple more slides, and then we have a guest panelist who's gonna share some info, and then I really want this to be an engaging dialogue, okay? And I want the audience to really share some ideas as well. So why do people say I'm not ready yet? Sometimes it's age segregation. I'm not ready for an old folks home. I'm not ready for senior services. I'm not old, okay? The thing that we need to recognize is that we are one of our housing options are the last legally segregated housing options, but in general, a lot of our services are viewed as by the general public as stuff for old people. And if the audience that we're communicating says in their mind, I'm not old, it makes it difficult to have a meaningful conversation and sell. The stigma, the age segregation and the stigma, they go hand in hand, but there are reasons for people saying, I'm not ready yet. Pricing and cost, and there's perception and reality is that I can't afford this, but perhaps somebody can afford it. We may need to guide them to show them how there's value in our services. Strangers. So for a thing that we hear on a regular basis is dad doesn't want a stranger in his house. He wants to age in place, but he doesn't want a stranger in his house. And so how do we, and he's not ready yet for that transition. So how do we work with individuals to make that happen? Previous experiences. If somebody had a bad experience with their mom in a nursing home or assisted living or with a home care provider, chances are they're going to be somewhat resistant to hiring our services, and that can make the conversation more challenging, and it can lead to somebody saying, hey, I'm just not ready yet. It's got to be really bad before I make this decision. Change in general. Let's face it. I mean, there's probably some statistics out there is that the bulk of most of us don't work well with change, but change that's associated with declining health or not being able to do the things that gave us purpose when we were younger or even 6 months ago can sort of complicate this decision-making process. My family doesn't want me to sell my house. My family doesn't want me to have somebody in the house. They think they can take care of me. My family is oftentimes something that can promote the phrase, I'm not ready yet. I need to talk to my son. I need to talk to my daughter, or what have you. And lastly, or definitely not lastly, but lastly on the list that I'm sharing with you all is I need to do more research. I'm not ready yet. Okay, these are all legitimate denials of service, but as we dive in deeper today, I think we're all going to understand that they may not be the real reason why somebody is saying, I'm not ready yet. It's just a tactic to enable them to sort of put off a decision or delay things, and hopefully through our relationship and dialogue with our prospects, we can understand where the resistance is, and they may not become a customer of ours. I think that's one of the most important thing. They may not join our village. They may not move into our senior community. They may not hire our home care agency. But if we can help them find a good place, it's not only going to help us sleep at night, but it's going to help those individuals with their decision, with this future change. Okay, all right. Several of you emailed some questions and comments, and I want to just throw this out to digest before we get into the more of a dialogue amongst ourselves. And I'm just going to read them real quickly because I know that people are on the phone. These came in over the last week. I would like to know how to gently instill a sense of urgency in them to help make a decision. They tend to be, the next is, they tend to be completely overwhelmed with how I'm going to do this. There is so much to do in order to get ready for the transition, and they don't know where to begin, usually don't know there are services that can help. One thing, talking amongst ourselves, it's okay to refer to the people that we're talking about as they, but one thing that I really try to do, and I slip up from time to time, is I try to replace they with we, okay? So instead of saying, I would like to know how to gently instill a sense of urgency in them, I would like to know how we can gently instill a sense of urgency when we are making decisions. Just think about it. Is again, we want to get away from age segregation, and one of the best ways is that even though we're not making this decision, we may make that decision at some time in the future. So making it a more inclusive kind of statement is helpful when we're communicating with families and individuals. The system for caring with a system for caring with seniors has deadly flaws. Please list those flaws, then address multifaceted ways to address them. For me, the most maddening flaws are poor pay, understaffing, absent health insurance for line workers. This may or may not be sort of something that we can address today. I wanted to share it with you because an audience member shared that, but right on there. Another comment, should for-profit senior living facilities be banned? Well, I don't think that's going to happen, but there is, there are nonprofit and for-profit providers in all spectrums, whether it be home care, assisted living, and resources. And if you're in the for-profit, you need to be aware of the nonprofit and vice versa, and how we are promoting our services thereafter. What groups should have authority to exercise and maintain the well-being of residents and staff? And how can we promote oversight when senior living facilities are in quarantine? So some great comments that came in before the event, and I'm hoping that we have more that come. Okay. Oh, come on. I had a really good slide here that I wanted to share with you guys. Let me see if I can look up the content while that says it's loading. And then while I'm doing this, I'm going to bring on our guest panel member, Chuck Thornton, who works in marketing at Friendship Terrace. And Chuck attended a session on marketing hosted by Senior Housing News and gained some insight from that. And I asked him, I said, hey, Chuck, if you wouldn't mind kind of coming on today and sharing some of the points that he learned in that session. But so Chuck, welcome. And while I'm trying to pull up these points that I wanted to share with the audience, tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background and what you do at Friendship Terrace.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you all and good morning. I've got to say, my being a part of this grew out of a dialogue with Steve. And in my 10 plus years being in senior living, I've dialogued with Steve regularly, both as ideas for me and reaffirmation of where am I going? Am I on the right path or not? Most people know me as a positive person. Yes, I'm the one on the parking lot with Steve, often parking cars when we did park cars before we went online. But I'll tell you, we're in a sobering time. And I shared these comments with Steve before today's session, and he said, Chuck, would you come online and share them with others? It grew out of a Zoom meeting last Wednesday, hosted by Senior Housing News and Sherpa, and the topic was Senior Living Sales Strategies to Succeed During COVID-19. Senior Housing News is geared, as I see it, to investors and owners that are overwhelmingly market rate operators. A clear message was that those of us who are responsible for putting heads in beds and making occupancy numbers are not in marketing or counseling, but in sales. And if we're not, we should be. My own thought is it needs to be tempered sales, not just going out and selling a refrigerator or something, but selling in a caring manner. But we need to recognize the real fears that are out there, acknowledge them, address them, and for goodness sakes, not ignore them. Some of the comments that came out of that session were a fear of sales directors that if I bring a person with COVID into my community as a new resident, will they affect the others who are already here? Another word that came out, we've got to work fewer leads and work them smarter. By smarter meaning, what are their objections? What do we answer? How do we do it? It's not cookie cutter, the approach we take, but it needs to be individualized for each person we speak to. Another one was desensitized to infections. Don't let it define your community. It's almost making us brain dead to the fact that, yes, there are people in our building, we've had infections, we've had them go around, but don't let it define us. And that it takes confidence to sell through this. A major hesitation right now is fear. There is fear of COVID in senior communities, period. From what one reads, it appears if one moves to a congregate senior setting of any kind, it's going to increase the chances of contracting COVID. In last week's Washington Post, there was a story about apartment living in New York City. Many may have seen it, noting that there are people looking to move out of the city, and a significant number cited the fact of having to use a shared laundry. It quoted a person who said she went to get her laundry from the washer and found someone had taken it out, handled it, and put it on a table. She had to wash it again and was tired of this. The article cited a 40% vacancy rate in buildings. And how many of us in senior living have communal laundry rooms? Socialization is a significant reason for looking to come to a senior community, as well as meals. As Steve said, now we have visitors who are not allowed in, entertainers, performers, lecturers, exercise leaders. They're all not allowed in. Lounges are closed, and most disheartening of all, meals are brought to apartments. One eats alone on disposable plates and cutlery. Staying at home seems preferable if this is the alternative. There's a fear of one's neighbor, the person down the hall, being as diligent as you about protecting yourself from the virus and masking, social distancing, being aware of where one is going. I don't know how many of you heard Steve talk last year about a walkability index. It was a great concept. It's communities to where I can walk to things. More and more people are looking for urban environments, places where they can walk to stores, walk to shopping, walk to entertainment, something to eat. Now that almost becomes a liability index, especially now that we're entering phase 1. And as we go to phase 2, phase 3, who among our people that we serve who are likely more susceptible to coronavirus are going to go out and put themselves in a setting for a meal, shopping, a public event that might bring it back to our community? How many of us have residents who are saying, when do we get the van out? When do we get to go to an event again? When do we get to go out and play again, shop again, like we used to do? There's also the fear of this past week and demonstrations locally and across the country. I said, we're in Tenleytown in DC. I was watching the news Saturday night, 11 o'clock, Channel 4, to see the Target store that's 2 blocks from us having its windows broken. Our activities director drove in yesterday morning up Wisconsin Avenue and said, Chuck, things are boarded up, stores are closed. The natural tendency in a time like this is to stay put or even retreat. We need to acknowledge it and address it. And then add the fear of having enough money to move, especially to a market rate community. I opened a community in Virginia 10 plus years ago as the last recession was starting, and I saw what I call the deer in the headlight look when people got their portfolio statements and found just how much money they've lost. And this time, it's happened in a much shorter period. Also, look at the number of people who have lost jobs, family members, friends, others who in the past would have said, don't worry, we're helping mom, helping dad, we're helping Uncle Joe get in. The webinar I attended said new leads are down. They are. We're also not having networking events. We're not there where we could see seniors, have our tables, visit with one another, get them to see us, and those who might not have made a call to come up and find out about us. Concurrently, it also said referral leads are down, especially to assisted living and SNFs. As visits, I hadn't thought of this before, to doctors' offices are down. People weren't going to the doctor. Doctors often said, Mom needs a safer place to go now. Elective surgeries were no longer taking place. Those people who then needed rehab were not being referred. And while in rehab, a good number of them might say, I need this more than going back on my own to stay within a senior community. One bright spot noted was that leads with urgency were converting quickly. Consequently, they said a way to get out of where we are now is to concentrate on past leads, really planning, working them. And one panelist said, this is where their move-ins are coming from because people they spoke to several months ago are now more infirm. They find out they physically cannot do anymore what they thought they could do then and might be more prepared to move in now if we are prepared to address them with how we can best satisfy their needs. It also noted that all of senior living is going to move to a higher rate of acuity, a higher level of need as a result of all the above. So as that webinar concluded, it said, work past leads, spend more time on each lead, planning the approach, and getting into closing techniques. What will I say? How will I say it? Those of us who ever worked in sales, I was in media sales before this. Tom Hopkins, Chris Lytle, Zig Ziglar, everything that's anathema to most of us. Some of these have to come and be a part of us again as we try and come up and organize our solutions to their needs. We have to have the confidence to sell it, said a panelist as the session concluded. As this pandemic lifts, there's not going to be a back to normal. Rather, the here, the now, the future is sales. And I know most all of you out there personally. We're not into that, talking to 80, 90-year-old people. So as I said at the beginning, is how do we do it with tempered, empathetic sales? And those are the thoughts I shared with Steve. And Steve said, Chuck, would you share them with the group? And thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody. And good luck in your community, talking to people at home, whatever service you provide now and in the future.
Thanks a lot, Chuck. And, for the audience, one of the reasons I like having multiple viewpoints. I know sometimes I get on these marketing calls and it's just sort of my sort of interpretation of the world. And why I wanted Chuck to share that is that it was another webinar on this exact topic. And Chuck, you raised a lot of valid points, and just the seismic shift in our culture and society, where prior to COVID-19, the big thing, we can see it all out there, is walkability and living in a densely populated neighborhood because you can live car free. And now this has happened. And like you said, Chuck, this is thrown a wrench in a lot of people's sort of vision of their desired, existence. It's sort of moving us back to the suburbs and a more car-dependent safer environment by not being in a densely populated environment. Let me share my screen again. I apologize because where are we at here? This is what I wanted to share with you. And I actually think that this came from Sherpa as well. And those of you who are not familiar with Sherpa, it sounds like they were on the panel at the webinar that Chuck went to, but they're a CRM in the senior housing world. But all of this, and Chuck's comments were from Senior Housing News, but all of these things can apply to other services and aging in place as well, as we'll dive into a little bit deeper here. But I thought this is one interesting approach and mindset when we are thinking about responding to "I'm not ready yet" or folks that are delaying. The first is be transparent. And the example is, I'm here to help you process this difficult decision. I'm not trying to sell you. I want to know more about you so we can make the next step together if you choose. Now, I love this because one of the things that turns customers and referral partners off in this field is selling too hard, or the appearance that you're putting that used car pressure sales on somebody. And so this also relates to knowing your customer and knowing your referral sources. So when you're having these conversations, you're able to empathize with the needs of the consumer, but then tell them stories about your current customers, residents, members that they can relate to. It's the best way to sort of exchange a dialogue. Wow, your story sounds a lot like another resident in our community or another client that we're providing home care to. Let me tell you about them and how we've helped them. Second is, and this is for everybody on this call today, is be collaborative. The quote is, "I can be a resource and an advisor to you throughout your decision-making process, even if you decide not to make a move." I think the successful marketing and outreach people that I've seen in this field, they turn more business away than they do accept business. But what they're not doing is they're not putting the hard pressure on that individual that they're working with. They're working as an advisor, and you may not get that person to move into your community or choose your home care agency or sign up to your elder law firm. But one thing that I guarantee that's going to happen is that person will remember what a good advisor you are, and they're going to tell their friends and other people, and you're going to get business down the pipeline. Be evocative. I'm here to ask you about your life story, to understand what you value. Let's talk about your past experiences and how they might relate to this decision. This one's pretty good because, number one, when somebody tells you about their life story, and if you know the life stories of all your other clients, you can collaborate. But what this can also do, it can help you understand why somebody might be saying, "I'm not ready yet." Oh, so your mom moved into a community and that wasn't a good experience. Let's find out what went wrong there. And then I can specifically address how our community or another community might be a different experience for you and or your family. And lastly, be reflective. I hear what you're saying and I understand why you aren't ready to move. Again, this was from a CRM in the senior housing, but we could use this with staying at home. I also hear you when you say there are problems with staying in your home, okay? But that could be flipped, okay? So I don't want this to be a senior housing discussion. This is an aging senior living services discussion today. So that is, those are some of the slides. Let's kind of turn to the audience and I see some questions have come in. And Again, to remind you, you can type in the Q&A box. You can also raise your hand, and we'll bring you on. We've got about 20 to 25 minutes to go through these things. Carolyn Wayner says, ageism is responsible for aging denial and stigma. Absolutely. And, I always like to say, sometimes the older adults are the ones that are in, enforcing this ageism. So, for example, many of you know, about 10 to 12 years ago, I lived in 5 different senior living communities. And one of the things that I saw firsthand was the sort of segregation that the residents would do from maybe the other residents that weren't as healthy as they were. At one community that I lived in, I was there with my son. He was 6 years old at the time. And we'd get in the elevator and the residents would say, "How you holding up with us old people?" And I had to tell them, my son is 6 years old. He does not see age the way we see it, okay? But that week we stayed there, he definitely saw it a little bit differently, but it wasn't his interpretation. It was ours. Let's see. Nonprofits, Judy Tiger says, nonprofits are not always better. They have different corporate governance. Absolutely. I agree with you, Judy, in that in general, organizations operate in a similar manner, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit. Yes, a for-profit has a return to investors and shareholders. The nonprofit, it may have a different, they still need to be profitable, and the money is may go to something else. But at the end of the day, it's who is running that organization, what their philosophy is what's important. And so I would caution anyone from making sort of blanket statements that for-profit for-profit and nonprofit are similar. They have different corporate structures. Let's see, Steve, when families are helping mom and dad and they want to age in place. Okay, so Dee Haslett is from a medical alert system, an emergency response system company. Yes, that emergency response devices can be great tools for somebody who is aging in place, especially if that person is potentially aging in place right now, but is saying, I'm not ready yet, but my goal is to ultimately move to a community for whatever reason. And not only emergency response systems, but there are a variety of other tools that can help us age in place. And that's important to remember is that our choice, what we are offering is not always the consumer's preference. It may be that there's an alternative that the consumer would prefer. Let's see, anonymous attendee, I am new to the pro-aging seminars. Have you covered the topic of budgeting for long-term care? No, but it's something on this topic. Well, I should say, we have covered that topic over the last 30 years. On these webinar series, we haven't addressed budgeting and finance, but it's something that I want to address in short order. It's also something that's very important when you're getting the I'm not ready yet, for us to kind of dive into, is this a cost and budgeting issue? And what tools can I use to help this individual figure out if they can afford it, and or if they can't, help them find alternate sources out there. Let's see, Judy Tiger, it is a matter of their values and management philosophy, how well run it is. Addressing for-profit and nonprofit. And the last question that I've got here, and then I want to, folks to be raising their hands and we'll bring you on board. Catherine says, I hesitate in using the phrase, I understand. We can't understand the unique experiences and fears of our older adults. Rather, I like to respond using their words. I'm scared to move. Response, making a move and change can be scary. Tell me more about the fears of making a move. Uh, really good comments, Catherine. Thank you. Anybody who's been through any kind of therapy can realize that some of the techniques that therapists use are probably some of the best techniques that we can use when we are talking to our clients. And that is one, as Catherine had mentioned, there's nothing that can anger somebody who's talking to us more than somebody sort of, and it's unintentional. It's sort of like, oh, I understand what you're going through. You might sort of understand what I'm going through, but you don't know what I'm feeling. And that can turn off a prospect. Just making a statement like that, that's very caring, okay? Linda says, people say they are not ready yet because they don't know how to get ready. Educating the family and the client on help that is available is very important before they can make a decision. Absolutely, again, some great wise words coming from the audience. I thank you for contributing these. It's much more authentic coming from you guys than me. Ardell says, Steve, can you, in your tech, unmute our videos at the end, please? It would be great to see everyone, if only for a brief wave. Ardell, I'm glad you brought that up. We are going to do that at the end of this session, and I'm just bringing this up. For those of you who missed the beginning, we've been surveying our attendees from this webinars. We had over 4,000 people attend these webinars in the last month. And one of the things that we want to improve is the networking. And so one of the suggestions was maybe doing more of a sort of a live networking sharing before or after these sessions. So we're going to do that at the conclusion of this, once we kind of go through all these comments. So thanks for bringing that up, Ardell. Scott says, I'm new to the group and I sell long-term care and life insurance. Are there opportunities to speak to family members about insurance options available for the next generations? Well, absolutely. I guess, absolutely. I mean, it's an area of confusion, but the challenge is finding those people that need to hear this content and getting in front of them. And part of what these marketing mastermind sessions are all about is none of us know how to crack the code to sell more long-term care insurance, to sell emergency response, to get people to move into our retirement communities, to get people to hire our home care agencies, to get people to join our villages, to even get people to utilize the free services of a government agency or a nonprofit. And the goal of these marketing masterminds is for us to come together and collaborate with the ideas that we're sharing on things that we can try. And so in response to, are there speaking engagements or ways that we can communicate with people that are interested in long-term care? Yes, there is. The difficulty is it's the needle in the haystack. It's what techniques, what am I going to try to sort of get myself in front of an audience and organizing that. And so that's, what we're brainstorming here. And I'm happy to chat with you one-on-one if that's helpful. Andrew Bettner says, Uncle Andy here, how many of the providers know how to help their clients auction sell provider? Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of, here's one of the challenges is there are dozens of services in this space. The diversity of the audience that we have, all you got to do is take a glance at the chat to just see how diverse it is. And the goal is to for all of us to educate each other on what we offer, who our ideal client is, and who are who traditionally we get referrals from. And by educating each other to the best of our abilities, it should sort of feed more referrals when we're having conversations with people that hit all the buttons. So have you covered the topic of advanced directives and other end-of-life legally binding documents people can put in place? Yes, we have addressed advanced directives, but just not in the Marketing Masterminds platform. Our goal of these Tuesday events is to just it's like a support group. We're all in this boat together, where what worked previously in marketing may work in the future, but we're moving the chairs around the deck, and we've got to reinvent how we're going to market and outreach to our consumers and providers, referral sources here in the future. And that's the goal of these sessions. Let's see. Is there, if anybody would like to jump on and make some comments, raise your hand. I've gone through the Q&A. If you put questions in chat, it's not easy for me to go through those. So I'd love to hear from a few of you with the 10 minutes that we've got remaining. Otherwise, we will just shift over and try this networking with the group here for the remainder of the time. Chuck, you're always insightful on things. And anything that you want to add to some of the comments that came in from the group in that time?
I've seen in there, Steve, where people are talking about age in place or a senior community. There's no one size fits all. It's absolutely geared to that individual and their finances, their family, their background, and it's up to us as marketers to be able to ask the right questions to find out, what do they need? Are they ready to come? And as people out there know, I will refer to other people if someone is not right for us, if their needs are more than what independent senior living can be, or if they're at home, here's someone who's got a real problem with getting rid of stuff. Calling someone to say, here are people you can call to get rid of things, to get ready to downsize, to move. So I like the comments in there. I just go back, and I'm not trying to say everything to please everyone, but it's got to fit the individual. And there are some who, are better off being at home and then being safe, and getting the lifelines, the other support, universal care, or the universal design for one's home. Those are all things to take in consideration. So it's not one size fits all, but it's up to us to ask the right questions to find out. And then in our prep, that's where we have the answers as best we can.
No, good. And thanks, Chuck, that you're monitoring that. I glanced at the chat and I kind of see that. And I think pre-COVID, I think in our field, there's always been kind of, hey, look, if you're in the aging in place camp, your goal is to, tout the AARP study that says most people want to age in place, this, that, and the other. And if you're over in the housing camp, it's sort of like, but hey, look, it can be isolating and lonely at home, and we've got activities and things of that nature. And so there's always been sort of this yin and yang in our field. I think one of the main changes, and I know the community of people on this call are going to be part of it, is that it's more there's gonna have to be more collaboration. But here we got Mark Ash on. Mark.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. Hope all are well. Mark Ash with Right at Home. Just, I keep hearing this and seeing this term aging in place, and Chuck hit on it, but it has to be reiterated over and over. People really, the majority of people don't have an understanding of what aging in place truly means to them, nor do they understand completely what it's going to take to age in place wherever they are. So it's incumbent upon us to first understand what their needs are and where they are at this point in time and where they see themselves, and I don't mean to use that cliche, but where they see themselves being able to age. And it takes so many aspects of all of the different businesses on this call. So Steve, you're right, we have to collaborate, but we all have to start with the point of understanding where that person is or where that family is and helping them understand what it would take for them to be able to age in place and understanding what it means to them, what aging in place is. We all have a different definition of what that is. So we have to clearly understand and meet them at their level of need.
Yeah, no, well said, Mark. And, we've all had these conversations where it's basically the definition of somebody aging in place is, I don't want to leave my home. I love my home. I like the swing set. It reminds me of my kids playing in the backyard. And then the reality, as Mark had talked about, it's sort of like, okay, well, that's your vision. Here are the steps that we need to take to make that a reality. And sometimes those steps are not what they want to hear, or that we want to hear if we're a provider, because it may sort of mean that, this family, may not be able to safely sort of stay here. Okay. I'm going to call on Ardell. I'm going to press the talk button, but don't say anything just yet. I want to read some of the questions that have come in. Let's see. Martha says, when you sell market, how do you maintain your integrity in speaking to the limits of what you can provide? Whew, boy, that's a great one, Martha. And I'm going to throw that over to the chat. So when you sell and market, how do you maintain your integrity in speaking to the limits of what you can provide? I think some of this can be challenging because if you're in a marketing position, your job is to ring the cash register for your organization, okay? And a lot of it is having flexible leadership that is willing to see sort of a marketing member sort of face the reality of sort of like what we can truly provide versus what the customer would like us to provide. And I think integrity is something that is going to be super important in our field. I think we are going to see, once things open up, we are going to have to be so transparent, and the questions that we are going to have for people in terms of, safety of their loved ones and themselves are going to be mind-blowing. And so integrity is a great word that you introduced into the discussion today. Susan Rannick says, it's all in the words you choose. Choice, not directives. Very, very well said, Susan. Encouraging people to exercise choice. Your life, your way, before someone else has to make the decision. Empower and encourage decision-making. I personally have been getting a lot of calls along those lines. In fact, right before this call today, had a woman, who's researching life plan communities here in the area, and now she wanted information on Atlanta, and I was helping her through that. And, I was saying, this is a challenging time, and she goes, oh no, this is a good time for me because I see this move is going to occur 2 years down the path, and I want to make sure that I have choices. Brian Miller says, as someone with new normal technology? What is Chuck's recommendation for connecting with decision makers to take a serious look at making an investment as the future of their community? Okay, so Brian, he has technology for senior living communities to help them better communicate. Chuck, any words of wisdom on, how you might do outreach? Like if there was a piece of technology that potentially could help Friendship Terrace, what is a way that you might encourage somebody to do outreach and marketing to the decision-making team at your place?
Just like we talk to someone, and this goes back to sales techniques of benefits analysis. What's the benefit of that versus doing it the way you are doing it now? And how many more people it can reach? What can it do? Is it safer? Is it easier? And then making it affordable. To be bluntly honest, I doubt there are many new investments that are going to be made in the next 6 months to a year, this fiscal year for sure, that are not absolutely dead set critical, that so many have had unexpected expenses in PPE, other costs that have come out, extra staff hours covering for people who said, I have to self-quarantine, bring others in. Those costs are up. And to be very honest, you can show me all the benefits in the world. I can pass it along, but just be prepared. They may say, okay, we'll put it in. I've had several that right now I've got ready to fly once people say, okay, pull the cord. But right now the cord has yet to be pulled.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, Ardell, I got you on there.
Great. On the chat earlier, do I need to unmute my video?
No,
Okay?
we're going to do that after
Okay, great.
you.
Fine.
And
On
Kelly.
the chat earlier, there was a great question about helping people understand what assisted living is. I find the more I educate, the more I engender trust. And I've just come up with another one. I understand completely the frustration in understanding what assisted living is because we all define it differently. May I ask you 5 questions? And they always say yes. And so the first one is your mother continent? Is she able to read her name on a pill card? Is she mobile? And could she make a passing score on a mini mental test? And the number 5 question I either do first or last, depending upon my intuition. Can she afford $5,000 a month? So I've just come up with that little rubric, and it really helps me get people engaged. They talk a lot more about the physical status of their mother, and it saves me a ton of time to learn at the beginning that they can't afford our prices. So I just want to share that with the group. It's a new thing. I've been using it. It's been working.
Well, and thank you. And here, Ardell, I'm going to just go ahead and promote you to a panel member so that you can share your screen, and we'll start transitioning into this attempt to network at the end. But Kelly Haltek, you've got your hand raised, and then guys, we're going to transfer to some networking here. Kelly?
Oh no! All I was just saying, I was just saying that, we're starting to open our doors to admissions, and I've been working with families through this whole time. And it's trust and being honest. And I think communities and places that have been honest throughout this whole COVID, they're coming back. People are coming back and saying, you were honest about what you had. You're starting to open, referring to other communities, staying in touch with other communities. I think, as I call it, the dance, we're just going to have to figure it out step by step to get through this, especially as we open our doors. Because I don't think our world's going to be the same for years. That's
very well stated. And Kelly, I'm going to promote you to panelist. You can share your video, and then
you're doing what to me?
Oh, if you want to share your video and join in on this networking thing, I just kind of moved you to panelist there. And then
Oh, I feel so special. Hi, Chuck.
Hi.
Susan,
Hello, Kelly.
oh, here, guys, mute your mics
okay.
real quick. Susan, you wanted to say something?
Susan who, Ronick?
Yeah, you. You
No,
had your
I'm
hand
listening.
raised.
I'm listening.
Whoops. I made Susan a panel member too. Okay, guys, we're gonna go to, if you want to try some networking in the traditional Zoom sense, you raise your hand and I will promote you to a panelist. And then we can do our best at doing a little bit of networking here at the conclusion of the meeting and see how this works. So if you want to kind of jump in on this little roundabout here, just raise your hand and I'll promote you to panelist. And let's see. And so while I'm doing that, let's see, everybody on there has, let's get somebody who hasn't talked to us yet to kind of jump on. And Stephanie Moore. Okay, Stephanie.
Hi there.
Yeah, just tell us who you are and share your thoughts. This is kind of open networking, something that we're going to try here and see if it works.
Yeah, this has been very informative for me. I'm a business development director with Brookdale Senior Living. So we are an assisted living in the Towson, Pikesville, Baltimore area. And I find all this so interesting and intriguing here, talking to everybody. It's been, I think, one of the things that people really struggle with, and Teresa was talking about this earlier, is the difference between SNFs and skilled nursing facilities and assisted livings. And I think that's something that we struggle with a lot. We have an apartment style living. And people now, with what's going on with COVID and everything else, seem to think of us as almost like a hospital setting. So I think there's a lot of fear out there with what's going on with assisted livings.
Yeah, and you know,
is becoming a real challenge.
Well, and as Chuck had mentioned on the Senior Housing News webinar, the in the immediate future, the predictions are that the resident that is going to move to a community is going to have a much more intense healthcare needs, and you can see how that could happen. So it might be interesting to see how the landscape changes. You know,
Yeah,
where
that's very much what we're dealing with. Crisis,
Yeah.
everything's a crisis now.
Yep.
Things,
So
yeah.
thanks, Stephanie. I'm going to just go around the horn here. Okay, Daniel Sanders, you're next in line.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Daniel Sanders here with For Sales, the estate sales, auctions, and appraisals company. It's an interesting conversation today, Steve. It's the topic went a different way than I thought it was going to. It was really more from the perspective of the potential residents, the clients, as opposed to the service providers. And it was funny.
Well,
I came into this with a mindset of the service providers. I'm not ready yet. We've been unfurloughing people. And we made the economic decision on behalf of our staff to that they were better off financially with unemployment, and that it has worked out well for them. But now I'm having a problem getting them back. So
yeah, and I think you know, when we look at those three buckets, a lot of the resources like Daniel's business and the resources that are out there, they are sort of hinging on people either moving to a community or coming up with this aging in place strategy. And so I can see how your perception on that would be that way.
It was still an interesting conversation. But if you remember, we talked a couple of weeks back at the moving downsizing session. The realtors have gotten so far ahead of us because they were deemed essential along with the title companies. So all of the support services, all the support resources, we're only now beginning to be able to look at reopening. So it's just interesting times for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And again, for those of you who want to kind of jump in on this attempt at networking at the end, just raise your hand and we'll bring you on. Next in line, I got Lisa Humes. Lisa?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Mhm.
Great. Humes with Health Markets. I help folks with both Medicare beneficiaries and group health plans, employee benefits, individual benefits, all kinds of things like health, life, long-term care, disability, and much more. So helping folks has not stopped for me. It's changed certainly because the networking has changed. I've been doing a lot of networking online. I can still meet with my clients via Zoom or on the phone, drop off materials to their home or mail them if they need something. So I feel very fortunate that for me, it hasn't changed a lot, except that my car isn't getting very many miles now. And it used to get a lot of miles, and now it's all via computer. That's a great thing as long as people have the technology and the patience to be able to do it.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, next is Linda. Whoops. Keep on talking. You're muted, Linda.
Hold on.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Okay. I'm not real good at technology, just so that you know, but I'm trying. Just to give you a little background, I'm actually an interior designer and a downsizer, and I started working with independent living communities when I lived in New Jersey. I'm now in Virginia, and helping people do the moving down process. So I've been there. I started doing it with my mom when I had to move her, and I did everything from visiting with them, measuring the furniture, doing a floor plan, right down to how to get rid of everything. I did estate sales, I did staging, I did the whole 9 yards. What I want to do now is educate the families and the clients on how to get started. I think, as I said in the chat, they don't know how to get started and they become frightened because the move is imminent, but they just don't know what to do. And I've started putting together my own webinar to educate people on what they can do, the resources that they can use. When I lived in New Jersey, I had a whole list of vendors. I had movers, I had estate sale people, I had everybody. So whenever somebody was moving, I'd say, okay, you need to call XYZ and get going. And then I would do estate sales. I'd help them clean closets. So I did it all. And I would like to just start to educate people now so that they can get started and they're not so frightened. It's overwhelming, it's emotional. These people are older, and it's a hard thing to do. So I think if we start educating them and their families, it will be easier for them to move into where they need to be.
Yeah, awesome. And this is really, what Linda talks about are opportunities for collaboration because, it's, many of us are trying to achieve the same thing. And if we can kind of come together, it's not just one person doing a webinar. It could be a team of 3 or 4 people doing it. Whoops. Make sure you mute yourself. Okay. Stephanie Moore is the next, but make sure you mute yourself if you're not talking. Yep. Stephanie. Oh, there's 2 Stephanie Moores.
Yeah, actually, can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
so
Lynn.
I'm
My
actually
Wait,
Lynn.
wait.
I don't know why Stephanie's name's coming up here, but we both work for Brookdale. So
okay.
I am I'm Lynn Matrovic, and I work. I'm the sales manager. So I do a lot of the incoming leads and things like that. And Stephanie and I also work on outreach together as well. She focuses more on the medical side, and I'm more on the non-medical side. So, but I found this very interesting, this call, because, that is always, obviously one of the biggest objections for me. I'm not ready yet. And, honestly, so they may not be ready, but tell us what I think what I do is I try to understand their situation and understand what does that look like for them when they're ready. And then sometimes, it's a lot of educating. Like, I might have somebody say, well, when my mother can't do anything for herself and she's basically in a wheelchair, then we'll be ready. And so then it's educating them that that's really not what the situation should look like. It's about, making the hard stuff easier for everyone and giving them a better life and a better quality of life. And it may, like you were saying earlier, it may not be assisted living. Maybe it's, home care or whatever, but it's really understanding their situation. And I think really showing some compassion and really getting to know all of the family and, the prospect. So, and, what I always try to do is, at the end of the day, let's create some balance and normalcy in your life. Let's see how we can do that. It may not be here, but, I'm here to help you find a solution, and that's, I think when I take that approach and it's just not all about me and putting a head in a bed, it turns out much different. And you're right, Steve. I can't tell you how many people I've been on the phone with that I know they can't afford us, or I know they can't, it's just not a good location for them. I help them, or I give them numbers or resources, and they're like, you're the first person that has really helped me. Most people are like, we can't help you, I'm sorry. And I have had other people call me and say, hey, she didn't move in here, but you were working with this family and they told me about you. But I think we have to also, in our roles, think of us as a resource, and it's not just all about Brookdale. And that has really, done well for us, right, Steph? Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing is just having that compassion, because they're going through so much.
No, great.
And I've been there, so I can kind of understand. I had to do this with my.
Whoops. Oh, shoot. I pressed the mute button, Stephanie. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
But my father-in-law lived here, so I had to go through this whole process. So I kind of can understand. I mean, it wasn't my dad, but it was still, my father-in-law, and it's very stressful.
Oh yeah. No.
So
great.
Anyhow,
Great comments.
Thank you for having me. This is my first call. Stephanie's been talking about you.
Okay,
She's
great.
like, you need to get on this.
Awesome. And as I go to Brian and ask Brian Miller to unmute, I want to kind of piggyback on something that Stephanie said, and let's just use this, individual who's in a wheelchair and resisting moving to a community and having this deep conversation and finding out all this information. One of the best things that we can do is when we hand the ball off to other providers is helping them with that information. Of course, with the client's permission, but we all know there's nothing more challenging than going through this difficult decision and having to make 20 phone calls where you're explaining yourself over and over and over again. And actually, I'm going to bring my dad up here. My dad had a healthcare issue where he was in the hospital a couple of years ago. And what he did was he typed out a sheet of paper and made photocopies of it to everybody who came into his room in the hospital, because he found that whenever he went to the hospital, he was repeating himself 100 times. So he just put it all on a piece of paper and he's like, here, read this, then ask me any follow-up questions. So that could be an interesting solution. Okay, Brian Miller.
Hey, Steve, that's good. Sometimes I wish we as marketing and salespeople could do the same thing.
Yeah.
But no, I was, unfortunately, Chuck had left. I wanted to thank him for his feedback, good information. But yeah, just to back up, I'm Brian Miller with Tech Forward Group. And I'd mentioned we're, basically the new normal technology. So the discussion about going from that active urban living, high contact community to a pullback at this point really kind of plays into what we do, because we have ResiCare, which is a mobile web app for residents to communicate, not only with their family members and friends, but administration and staff. And then as part of that, we bring in fitness programming and also telehealth. Being a company in its infancy, we've been battling, quite frankly, short term, trying to find a couple of pilot locations, because people are busy, they are underwater, they're dealing with crisis situation. What we're hoping to bring is some answers and some solutions to dealing with interaction with lower risk factors, at quite frankly a very low investment level. When you start factoring in, we're looking at sometimes below $10 a month per resident, depending on the size.
Well,
So
yeah, we'll keep the word out for some pilot programs, communities that would pilot. And, the unfortunate thing is launching a new service and, dealing with budget, but it's interesting. We've been talking about, I'm not ready yet for the seniors and the family members, but you're dealing with an I'm not ready yet for the senior housing providers, because like Chuck had brought up, they may have just spent $20,000 unbudgeted on PPE or something like that.
Correct.
So yeah, so thanks Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, and next is Scott Bach.
Hey, Steve. Scott Bach Hansen. How are you guys doing? Appreciate the
Good.
time today. So I'm new to this group, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to meet with everybody. I'm going to try and keep this to a minute to respect everybody's time so that we can meet everyone. My background is I was in the office equipment industry as a sales manager, regional sales manager, and then left that industry for the engineering industry and became a vice president of sales for an international engineering firm, and recently became one of the numbers that lost their positions due to the COVID-19. And so one of the things that I decided to do was go back into business for myself and open my own consulting business. And so my main focus area is similar to what Lisa Humes is doing regarding the benefit side. I work in insurance and long-term care. I'm not really interested in getting into the healthcare and disability side, so I'm looking forward to maybe connecting with Lisa to share some referrals to her as those times come. Currently, I also teach officials, so I met a gentleman named David Posner, who introduced me to this group. David and I referee, and we teach referees together. And I also currently work for the NBA as a courtside administrator and referee operations. So right now, I'm not really doing anything for them either.
Wow, talk about another industry that has received a left hook is the sports and entertainment industry. I mean, and just playing a basketball game is not just like living in an assisted living is not the same it used to be.
You're right, and I think one of the things that really draws me to this marketplace is I'm also a lay servant minister with the United Methodist Church. And so I lead worship services for various places, mostly at Lincolnia Residence Center every Sunday night. I go pick up my mother-in-law at Green Spring. She's my piano player, and that's our Sunday night date. And we go and we lead worship for the residents that are seniors at risk. And I think that the main thing for me in this group is I want to accomplish 3 goals. One is I want to build relationships and get to know people. I'm very interested in talking to Linda, who is the interior designer, who I just put down that she's a downsizer. But I think that there's some opportunities to build a relationship there, learn something new. I think if we stop learning, we're in trouble. And so I want to learn something new every time. So I've signed up for a bunch of these webinars. And the last one is to seek opportunities to collaborate. And I do a lot of busy networking. I'm lifelong in sales. My focus is really going to start looking at trying to do some types of group teachings to either Lifelong Learning Institute, churches, build on the relationships that I have so I can network and then introduce some of the other people that I meet into that group. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for having me, and it's
All right.
nice to meet everybody.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And again, this was an experiment doing this at the end. And let's see, Mary Lamar, I'm bringing you on, but I'd like us to wrap up in the next 7 minutes, and I don't want to shortchange the other people that are there. But if you can try to be as concise.
Something really quick for you.
Awesome.
I'm up in the Philadelphia area, so I don't think we're competing anywhere. But what we have done, I'm a home care agency, and what we have done is entered into casual relationships with the existing living facilities, be it memory care or residential care, because a lot of people are resistant to going into those facilities right now. So what we do is we take them as a home care until they become comfortable with it. So they think of us as an extension of that facility. It's worked well it's a win-win for both of us. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. And I actually feel like that is probably the best way for home care providers to communicate with their families is that, it's respecting the choice that they might move later, and it's building relationships that can go both ways. Jennifer Brown, you're next here.
Thanks, Steve. First of all, I wanted to thank my colleague Chuck, and I'm not sure that he, unless I missed it, quite introduced himself. He's the marketing director for Seabury at Friendship Terrace, which is a senior housing community in Upper Northwest. And I'm with Seabury Resources for Aging. I'm the community relation manager, and we work throughout the DMV, but primarily in Nova, Montgomery and Prince George's County, and throughout the district. And my primary areas of responsibility are helping to support our care management and life enrichment program, which provides care management and life enrichment throughout the DMV. But the one observation I want to make, because I enjoy a very long career in executive sales and marketing in the healthcare industry, is a number of the points that you were making about selling to an older adult population and being highly sensitive to their personal needs and circumstances. And whether it's in a for-profit business or it's a not-for-profit business, you have the overlay of senior management picking out and picking through each of your leads and the status of your leads and how are you moving them forward and how are you closing them. So there becomes a disconnect between the frontline salesperson and middle and senior management, executive management, which is really totally focused on that move-in or that sale or closing that deal versus servicing your client to the best of your ability. I agreed with the comments and strategies that were certainly brought forward, but being on both ends of that spectrum, there's a lot of downward pressure to close that sale regardless of what the objections to the sale are. My 2 cents.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Dee Haslip.
Hello, everybody. I'm the owner of CareMed Emergency Medical Alert System, and I'm in Cockeysville, Maryland. And I service pretty much the entire nation for any senior who wants to age at home. It is a great stepping stone for somebody to protect themselves individually. We have the standard push buttons, whether it's a wrist pendant, neck pendant. We have fall detection, which is huge because in the event that somebody trips and falls and goes unconscious, it activates automatically. when I enter somebody's home, I'm a former paramedic firefighter with Baltimore County. I evaluate a home really quickly. I see some serious hazards right there. As soon as I go into somebody that's 60, 70, and 80 years old, they have area rugs everywhere throughout their homes and they trip over them. So what we're trying to do is reduce all that risk. We're trying to protect them 24/7. It's very inexpensive if you think about it, based on an emergency room visit, step down unit to rehab, nursing homes, as opposed to staying at home. So we can help them do that. And I'm also affiliated with some care management people. And I also work with estate lawyers, planning and estates and everything. So if anybody has any seniors that are out there that need that extra little protection, look at it as if it's a life insurance policy or an auto insurance policy. You pay monthly premiums on them, and they're there if you need them.
Great.
So that's what I have to say about it, and I want to be quick about it. So
Yeah,
thank you all
thanks.
for having me, and look forward to seeing you.
Awesome. Thank you. And let's see. Oh, great. We've got, you've got an interesting name. Tell us what your name is.
Are you talking to me, Steve?
Yeah, yeah.
It's Debbie Fanberg. It's been a while. It's nice to
Oh my
see you.
God. See, without the name tag, I didn't know who was on there. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not used to having the privilege of being at home to do Zoom. I've been at work every day. Thanks for calling on me. I don't know if Susan Rannick's still on or not. Excuse me. So it's Deborah Fanberg from Arbor Place in Rockville, Maryland. And now I've lost my voice while I'm talking. This is great that you guys are doing this, and I haven't been on in a while. Wonderful, Steve, you've probably already done this, but if we could get a list of contacts from everybody that's participating so we can reach out individually, it'd be fantastic. For instance, seeing Susan today jogged my memory that we could use her to do an in-service via Zoom at Arbor Place. So Arbor Place is a 16-bed private center designed specifically for dementia. And what I wanted to add to the call, if anybody's interested, is we've been aggressively testing. I'm so sorry, I have a frog in my throat. We've been very aggressively testing for COVID-19. So we do have a new move-in tomorrow who's COVID negative. Excuse me. And the way we've done that is she flew in from Houston, actually with a lot of support on a private jet. And it was all subsidized. And then she's been isolating with her daughter at home, and we've been testing them both regularly. And then the last 48 hours, we've been testing them. And the daughter and the mother will come tomorrow to move in. And so we're trying to leverage what has been very difficult data to manage, because we did have an outbreak of COVID despite all of the measures that we took. But we're trying now to leverage the data that we have learned from to make safe move-ins. And I'd be happy to share that with anybody that's interested about how we're procuring testing, how we're conducting testing, how we're utilizing it, and how we're trying to create sort of a safety bubble at Arbor Place, because I'm finding I feel safer at Arbor Place than I do out in Bethesda, where they've started boarding up the buildings and we're dealing with all of these other crises along with the pandemic. So I know somebody earlier in the call was talking about urban environments versus suburban, and suddenly being in suburban Rockville and not being near downtown, we have this wonderful outdoor space and you can get outside, and our residents who normally inside, if they will tolerate it, will wear a mask, but we're all otherwise in N95s and we're being double tested weekly. We still have not lifted the restrictions for families or providers, so that's all still telemedicine. But I would be happy to be a resource to you guys, and I see a lot of opportunities for resources here on the screen and that I'd heard earlier in the call. I just apologize for dialing in late and not having my name.
No,
So
that's
again,
okay.
it's Deborah Fanberg from Arbor Place in Rockville.
And okay, let's see. Who are the remaining people on the screen? Just raise your hand for real. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3. Let's get through you guys, and then here I'm going to do Maria White first, and then again, this was an experiment, guys. I'm going to digest all this. And one thing that Deborah brought up about sharing a list, one of the things that I'm trying to dial in, as you can see in my emails, because the volume of my emails have been going out, I'm very sensitive to the amount of emails that people are getting. And so I really can't share these lists, because then it would be, there, just so you guys know, there was over 170 people on this call. There's only 30 now. But if you can imagine, if you don't like getting my emails, if I threw another 170 in your inbox. So what I'm going to say to you guys on this call right now, if you want contact info from somebody who's on the call, email me. I'll get you. I'll connect you. I'll do the intro. Let's do it that way. Okay, Marie White.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I just joined last month to the group. So my name is Maria and I own Enough with the Stuff. I do a lot of senior downsizing, and that's kind of the area I really love to work with. I just wanted to share my own story and my perspective as to why so many people hesitate to move forward is because when they look around their home with all of the stuff in it, they are absolutely overwhelmed with where to begin. So it is a daunting thought to think that you have to go through every single thing, and to do it by themselves is just about impossible at a certain point in their lives. My parents resisted, and they were young. They didn't have medical issues, and they fought it tooth and nail. Didn't do it when they should have, and the markets changed, and then everything was a disaster. So they didn't do it when we were trying to get them to do it. But it was because they were absolutely overwhelmed with the volume of stuff and just everything else involved with getting your house ready to put on the market, and just the whole. So they didn't have anyone, and this was before I did all of this. So I didn't either know the resources or who to reach out to. And so to have that person come in and be able to say, okay, I've got you, is so reassuring. Awesome. That you have the resources and all these contacts, that you could say, oh, I've got a guy who does that. I got somebody who does that. Don't worry.
Yep. No, it's great. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Down on the bottom, who hasn't talked? Raise your hand like this. Okay, Jean. And then I'll do Teresa, and then I'll do Linda, and then we're just gonna jump off this call. Okay, Jean.
Yes, hi, I'm Jean Stanislawski. I work with Jennifer Brown at Seabury, and also Chuck Thornton in the Care Management Division. I wanted to just dovetail into what Jennifer was saying. I've been in senior marketing sales since 1993, and experienced the downturn in 2008. And I was working at a kind of a big box corporation in DC. And it's a shame because upper management has no empathy into what the people with the boots on the ground are experiencing in working with people. And if only the corporate middle management and upper management can really find out what's going on and provide support for the marketing people rather than pressure, I think everyone's lives would be better and there would be more people moving into the communities. I just wanted to.
Oh, no. Thank you. I echo Jean's statement. Leadership is such a critical element, especially in senior housing. And it's also one of the things that I'm often reminding people not to draw a conclusion from one provider to another, because if you've got an executive director at one place that has a much better mindset, it can radically change the environment that's in that organization. Okay, Teresa?
Want to make sure I wasn't on mute. Hi, everybody. Teresa Grant. I am here representing Debbie Belkovich today with Senior Care Lifestyles. She wasn't able to attend, so I am new on board for her business development. So this has been really nice to, get this whole understanding of the whole senior lifestyle and how everybody works together. I think one of our biggest concerns mainly was, trying to educate some folks the difference between nursing facilities, assisted living, and the nursing homes. I think that people don't understand. I think they're fear about contacting us because we've been a little slow is the fact that they think that, you know, the folks are going right into a nursing home, and we want to let them know that there's other options out there for them to age in place, and, you know, all the other facilities that are out there. And our next concern is, you know, what's going forward with the nursing facilities and assisted living, on how we're going to get families to tour the facilities with the COVID-19 restrictions that are going on out there right now, and what the next process will be and how they're going to be implemented. So does anybody have any insight into that at this point?
Well, because we're kind of ticking down, I would say just
that's a big question.
Yeah, exactly.
Do that next time.
Okay, no, absolutely. And then our last, who's the last one? Just who hasn't said anything, or we're good? Okay, let's end this meeting. Thank you, everybody. Again, and those of you who hung out, who are either on the panelists or in the attendees, send me an email on your thoughts on this, doing this networking like this at the end. We've never done this before, and I can see some ways it could be done more efficiently, but I think it adds a component that makes this closer to a live meeting than what we've been doing. I got to end the meeting right now, so just email me one-on-one on that one. But thanks, everybody, and I'll follow up with that.